Hey there everyone, what's up? Welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be bringing you another deck list for Final Fantasy TCG that likes to step a little bit outside the box. It's taking inspiration from other players within the community and trying to convert them into something that's quite digestible for new players and something that, you guys can go to a local tournament and have a lot of fun with. Now before we get started, let's not forget that all of my patrons on Patreon get early access to all of my videos as well as a bunch of other benefits as well. And don't forget that on my Discord channel we have a load of people who are all willing to talk about deck ideas that they've got for FFTCG, just general chatting about the TCG as well as the mobile games for FF14 and a bunch of other stuff, so don't forget to check that out. Now this deck list that we're going through today is called Hellfire Dust, which honestly I came up with just because I thought it sounded quite cool, and it's honestly quite appropriate for the way that my hair looks at the moment because it looks absolutely atrocious and needs cutting, colouring or something doing with it. But anyway, going back to the deck, it's a combination of Shiva and Ifrit, so Hellfire and Diamond Dust. And I was inspired by a deck I saw a little while ago actually that was posted by Joshua Freeman Birch, who I will leave a link to in the description box below for that deck list. And I wanted to kind of adapt it to a couple of other deck lists that I've seen more recently, such as ones I've seen on Barnes Final Fantasy Corner and some of the local deck lists that have seen a lot of play recently. And I think Fire and Ice is a really interesting combination of colours that we don't see an awful lot of, so I wanted to go in with the power of Reynn. Now Reynn is a card that honestly doesn't see nearly as much play as she should, and honestly is probably one of my favourite cards in Opus 7 just because of the sheer capabilities that she presents. She's a searcher for a searcher, because the monsters that she searches for search for summons, and if you can get those kind of search chains going, then there's some very interesting things that you can get going in terms of consistency. And Fire, as we all know, isn't the best when it comes to consistency, but I think that Reynn actually helps it quite a lot. And Shiva from Opus 4 is a big focal point for some ice decks. And I sat around and I thought, well hold on, let's put 2 and 2 together here. How do we then make it so that Reynn makes it so that your opponent can't effectively attack you without losing their entire board? And then I went back to Joshua's deck and I was like, well this focuses a lot on snow and having small costing forwards as well as Reynn just to push damage through. So I thought about doing something similar but incorporating the Warrior of Light engine, meaning Aegis, Sol and Warrior of Light. And I thought, well they're quite aggressive anyway. Then obviously with Sol, Warrior of Light, Babblers, Frit, then I thought, hold on a minute, Godot makes a lot of sense in this deck as well because he makes it so that all of your other guys are that much stronger, and in combination with things like Shulk, who brings in a 2-drop that may or may not have haste through Sol or Warrior of Light, you then have access to giving haste to Shulk as well, so you can then just make these massive swings in attacks that you kind of go from 0 to 4 damage or 4 damage to dead really quickly. And because of the dull and freeze capabilities of this deck through the different Shivas, through Genesis, Sarah also makes a lot of sense in this deck as well because you have Snow in the deck. You have Godot in the deck who's an FF13 forward. She herself is an FF13, so honestly you only really need one other FF13 character for her to be really worthwhile. And then that means that Mog is then worth running because we then have 2 search targets for it through Godot and Sarah. And the deck kind of built itself, actually. Like, the only things I kind of struggled with were which Ifrit to run, because honestly, the Ifrits are not good, being honest. I mean, I quite like the Opus 7 Ifrit that allows you to kind of take a point of damage and then clap back really nicely with 8k. But because we have Frit in the deck, you don't really want to search for that Ifrit because you don't really want it in your hand, you want it in your damage zone. So I thought, maybe not that one. And then I thought, well, I guess the 2 CP 6000 damage kind of coincides with a lot of what we're doing, because it means that you can cheaply do like a slight zapped Ramu combo by attacking with Frit, it getting blocked, you searching up Ifrit and then just casting it immediately to remove whatever blocked it if it's too big. It basically just makes Frit a lot less blockable, and I thought that that would be the best way for me to go with it. In terms of which Shivas to pick for this deck, I actually really wanted to focus on Opus IV Shiva because I wanted that I'm gonna kill your guy kind of capability, and there are 7 Shivas in this deck, so at absolute maximum this Shiva's gonna be dealing 12,000 because it won't deal 13 because it is the 7th Shiva. But honestly, I wouldn't ever expect that. If you're ever getting like 8,000 plus out of Shiva, she's doing a good job. But I had to absolutely 100% include Opus III Shiva because it makes it so that Babblers is practically unblockable. Because if your opponent blocks it, you could just outright kill them there and then. If you've got Babblers, Shulk, Warrior of Light and Godot out, for example, your opponent's not going to want to block the Babblers, because you just search for Opus IV Shiva, dull their 2 biggest guys, and then just go in. And it's actually really quite effective as an offensive strategy, just to kind of throw that little 1 in, because they might not block it, get the extra 1 damage in, because then you're putting your opponent in a really bad position. And this is why I really like the World of Final Fantasy monsters. Then this includes Zapt as well. Honestly, there is so much capabilities for these 3 monsters that I absolutely wanted to build a deck around them. And so I was really pleased to be inspired by various different decks that I'd seen that do run 1 or 2 of those monsters. Now the backup lineup in this deck is a little bit trickier, but I wanted to try and include as much sort of consistency as I could, because Jill Nabat functions as an EX burst that freezes, as well as an FF13 character for the purposes of Sarah. And then Meath, I thought one of it would be worthwhile because there's actually only 3 different costs in this deck. In all honesty, you could actually up Meath to 2, because you know, if you don't need, say, a second Jill Nabat because you're not going to use the rest ability, you could go and search for any of the 2-drop forwards that are in this deck. If you don't need the second Snow because it's a dead draw, then you could go and search for any of the 4-drop forwards in here. If you've used the Mog already, it just means that the dead cards that you could draw aren't dead, because they could then go and search for something else. But Meath is quite often an early game play, so it depends on what you're actually looking for. Being able to trade like Shulk for Reynn or Reynn for Shulk, if you already have one of those out or you don't need to search for monsters, is actually quite useful as well. Ninja I really like just because I like more than Red Mage, mainly because we already have 5 sticky backups in here through Jill, Meath, Vivi, Mog and Snow, so I didn't want to run a 6th one. But Ninja's useful as well because it doesn't cost any other resources to use, whereas Red Mage does. So I thought when you're making that late game or that mid game push, preferably, because you want to accumulate the advantage as quickly as you can in this deck, because this is hyper aggro, then having a Ninja as well as a Shiva could make it so that your opponent's bigger board, if you're playing against something like Water, still can't do anything. Like Ash is all well and good sitting there and she can reactivate herself if she's done and frozen, but if she can't block, then she's useless. And that was the mentality for putting in Ninja. Scholar, similarly, I wanted something that could get rid of Vikings and Laylas and small blockers so efficiently, so that I could keep my opponent's board to a minimum, so that Snow and Shiva, etc. could do the rest of the work for me. Vivi I wanted in here because I wanted early game aggro, or something to ward off early game aggro so that I could continue to do so. Basically, I want to keep my opponent's board as small as possible so that I can lock it down with things like Snow, Sarah, Shiva, etc. And I just kind of thought that, you know, having as many EX bursts in this deck as possible as well was also really, really beneficial to the deck. There are 17 EX bursts in this deck, which is actually a lot for an ice deck at the very least. So I thought that, you know, you being able to push without too much backlash of having being pushed back would be really beneficial, because if you've got Shivas in your break zone, your opponent hits you and Opus IV Shiva goes over, chances are that thing is going to die. The only thing I did want to kind of contemplate was running Illusionist in this deck, because Y'shtola is probably a problem for this deck because she can't take damage from anything. So that writes off all of my Shivas, my Ifrits. It can be a real pain. But if you're confident enough that you've got something that's going to be able to block Y'shtola, then you could run Illusionist in this deck as well to try and make it so that she has to attack. Dadaluma is a pain as well, but you can at least remove him. Y'shtola is a big issue. Diablos shouldn't do anything to you because there's no 5-drops in this deck. And a lot of things sort of benefit from dying, like the World of Final Fantasy monsters, or they're such good value it's less valuable for the Diablos to get played. God forbid that anything makes Diablos less valuable to be played, like Sol or, you know, Firion, things like that. Firion I like in here purely because there's a lot of removal for smaller forwards, so that you can make that big push, because you can always dull the bigger ones so that they're out of the way. But any kind of little nuisances you can get rid of with Vivi, Firion, Ifrit, World of Final Fantasy monsters, etc, etc. So you're basically just trying to pave the way for you to just get that one massive smack in. One of the things I like about this particular colour combination is, while there is a lot of kind of synergies within it that make a lot of sense as well, there's a lot of variety that you can have with this deck. If you have a look at the deck that inspired this one, it's actually very different from this, and I'm also not running any light or dark cards in here, so there's lots of room for you to run something in that region. There's plenty of wiggle room for you to experiment with this deck. You don't even have to run as many Shivas as I'm running. You could go with a more sort of well-rounded package and use Babblers to just grab Opus IV Shiva. And I think that it's really interesting, and I really encourage you guys to go out and take this deck and just play around with it. We've got Opus VIII coming in the next couple of months, so hopefully a deck like this can actually benefit from that as well. And instead of us going into completely new things, I'm trying to kind of open everyone's eyes to the possibilities of deck profiles that are available now that could actually just be improved with set releases. It's also important to note as well that the kind of cost efficiency of this deck is actually very high. The World of Final Fantasy monsters are essentially free because when they die they go and get something back, so the 2 CP that you spent into them is refunded, and if you want to build up Shivas in your break zone you can always just discard one, although I wouldn't recommend it, you probably want to use those. And then you have Shulk and Aegis, which cheat a 2 CP forward into play, and there are 12 2 CP forwards in this deck, so honestly the chance that you're going to be able to play something, even if it's not a Warrior of Light, through Aegis, or you know, the only forward that Shulk in this deck can't play is Babblers. So there's 9 different things that Shulk can play, and there's 12 different things that Aegis can play, 6 of which are Warriors of Light, which benefit directly from him. So your cost efficiency is actually going to be very, very high. Reynn is also essentially a 1 CP card, because when you play her, you go and get something else. So honestly, she's just going to be she'll be great for like party attacking or just like getting that extra little bit of damage in. There's a lot of just efficient, cost-effective forwards in this deck that will allow you to push the game as soon as possible. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope that you've enjoyed this deck profile, and I hope that you go out and try it out in your local events and see what you think. And I also encourage you guys to switch things up and send me a message in the comments below, or on FFDecks, or on Facebook, or any of my social media links, and let me know how you've changed the deck to your liking. And over the next couple of weeks I'll be posting loads more videos on Final Fantasy TCG. Hopefully we'll get some more Opus VIII spoilers coming up soon. And also Opera Omnia, which I've been doing a lot of streaming for, which you can check out my Twitch link in the description box below. And I'll be doing loads of other stuff as well. So thank you very much for joining me, and don't forget to subscribe, and I shall speak to you guys soon. Bye.